there, this is Dr. Diandra from buildingspeed.org, trying something new today. Just like the drivers have their SMT data that they look through, those of us who follow NASCAR closely and or play fantasy sports or bet, we also have data we can look at, and that is practice and qualifying data. So let me take you through some of the data from yesterday's practice and qualifying at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Let's see what we can learn. First thing first, let's take a look at practice times. This graph shows you the best practice lap time for each driver, and you can see that two drivers had real standout practice laps, and that was Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson. Now, I don't have the data to prove this, but I have a feeling because those laps were so much better than everyone else, and because of how those two drivers qualified, that they may have gotten a little lucky help from the wind. Another thing to notice is that this is a very rare case in which 6 of the 10 top times for drivers in practice actually came from drivers in the A group. And that probably had to do with the warming up of the track as practice went on. Let's take a look at the actual numbers. Chastain was fastest with a 29.305. Gragson was about a tenth of a second behind him with a 29.402. And then Ty Gibbs, who sort of marks the beginning of the normal spread, was third with a 29.531. If you look at it, there is a difference of about a quarter of a second between first and third, which is pretty unusual. That's why I think there might have been some issues with weather, specifically wind, helping out. Now you'll notice there's sort of a hitch when you get to Martin Truex Jr., and they go straight up from there. So the time between Martin Truex Jr.'s 29.939 and Ty Gibbs's time is 0.4 seconds. So all those drivers there in that long sort of beginning first slope are separated by 0.4 seconds. It's important to remember that different teams have different purposes during their practices. And so having the best score in practice doesn't get you anything. It has to do with qualifying and then eventually with the race. Let's turn now to the cumulative lap time averages, which I think show you a whole lot more than the best times do. These are still ordered in terms of best single lap speed, but they also show the times for 5 laps, 10 laps, 15 laps, etc., etc. Only 2 drivers ran 25 laps or more. But let's take a look at the differences, how much difference in lap time you have between the single best lap and a 5-lap run. If you look at Ross Chastain, his best single lap speed was 29.3. Look how far that goes down after 5 laps. That's up to 29.9, so that's about 0.6 of a second in just 5 laps. Look in contrast at Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has the smallest difference between his best lap and 5 consecutive laps. The difference is only 0.057 seconds. And so if you follow across here, what you see is that there are some drivers, Busch in particular, he was 16th fastest compared to Chastain. But if you look after 5 laps, he's faster than Chastain. So this kind of data is actually going to give you a lot more information than looking at just who ripped off the fastest lap if you're thinking about race time. Continuing to look at Busch's numbers, he actually has a fall off of 0.7 seconds over 25 laps, which is really pretty good. Compare that with some other drivers. Look, for example, at Hamlin, who has a huge jump between both the best lap and a 5 consecutive lap run, and also another big jump between 5 and 10. Okay, now some of this is, figuring out how the car is running, and maybe it's not doing exactly what you want it to do, but some of it is also tire management. Another thing that is probably more interesting than useful is how many laps each driver ran. As you can see here, William Byron ran the most laps of any driver with 29. Hamlin ran 28, Truex 27, and Ty Gibbs 26. Then we have a number of drivers who ran 25 laps. Let's move on now to qualifying results. This graph shows you the qualifying time in seconds as a function of driver. Group 1A are shown as left-pointing red triangles, and Group 1B as right-pointing yellow triangles. The stars are the times for the drivers who made it onto the second qualifying lap. So the first thing I'd like to point out is that you will notice that neither Chastain nor Gragson did very well in their single qualifying run, despite having the best practice times. That's another reason why you just shouldn't put too much emphasis on practice times. Earlier this week, I posted a story on NBCSports.com about how they've changed qualifying, but why it's still sort of unfair for the top qualifiers. And that's shown right here. If you look, for example, at Chase Elliott, he actually ran a faster qualifying lap than Wallace, Truex, and Stenhouse, but Elliott did not make it through because he was in Group B, and there were 5 other drivers who had faster times than he did. That is one more argument for making qualifying maybe alternating, one from Group A, one from Group B, so that the fastest drivers are qualifying closer to each other. You will notice, however, that 4 of the fastest 5 qualifying times came from drivers in Group B. And with that, I'm going to end here. I had meant to get this out right after practice and qualifying, but sometimes things don't quite work out the way you hoped they would. Anyways, if you have thoughts, comments, or requests, I'd love to know if this is actually useful for people, because if it is, I'll keep doing it. Here's how to get a hold of me. Thanks again for listening.